Hello and welcome to Pepped Up by Paintings. I'm Lynn from Beyond the Palette, and today I'm going to be talking about the first of three panels that together form a story called The Story of Patient Griselda. These panels are in the National Gallery in London. They date to 1494, but we don't actually know who painted them. So therefore the attribution on the gallery wall is simply the master of Patient Griselda. They were intended, though this we can be fairly sure, they were intended to be gifted on the occasion of a marriage, and they were essentially bedroom furniture. They're quite an unusual shape, so they're rectangular, quite long, and not very tall. So they were intended to be set into a wall at shoulder height. So they're called spalliera in a wedding chamber. So just bear in mind as I go through the story that they were a wedding gift, probably to a bride rather than a groom. The story of Patient Griselda comes from a text called the Decameron, which was written in the mid-14th century by an author called Boccaccio, who was really very popular even in his time. He wrote in the vernacular rather than in Latin, so his texts were a little bit more accessible and they're quite lively. And the whole premise behind the Decameron, 100, is that 10 people are isolated together in a villa just outside of Florence. I wonder why these paintings came to my mind. And each of those 10 people is tasked with telling 10 stories. So in all, the Decameron is a series of 100 stories, and Patient Griselda is one of them. So today we're looking at this first panel, marriage. It's quite a complex work to look at as a whole. There's a lot to unpick, and that's because the main characters actually appear multiple times throughout the same image. But we need to start, obviously, at the beginning of the story. And the beginning of the story is with Gualtieri, the Marquis of Saluzzo, who loves nothing more than to go hunting. So here he is hunting in the top left corner of this painting. He's pretty sure that he's going to catch that stag, because it's heading towards the end of a cliff. So a poor thing doesn't really have a chance. He doesn't want to marry, but his subjects desperately do want him to marry. He needs to produce heirs, if nothing else. And so eventually he says, okay, all right, you win, I'll go and find a bride. And he does, and he chooses a peasant girl, Griselda, which is the scene that is taking place just beneath the hunting scene to the left-hand side of this panel. There's no romantic proposal. He doesn't get down on one knee and say, Griselda, you're beautiful, I've admired you from afar, please will you marry me? No, he just says, take me to your father's house, which Griselda does, and that's the scene that's taking place on the opposite side of the painting. This pink house to the right-hand side is Griselda's father's house. And once there, he essentially says to Griselda and her father, I'm going to marry Griselda, and the stipulation is that she will be obedient to me at all times, no matter what. Not really that unusual in 15th century Tuscany. A woman was passed from the property of her father to the property of her husband, essentially. But nonetheless, it's an odd thing to actually stipulate. Griselda and Gualtieri are then seen leaving the father's house here on the right-hand side. And then we have a scene towards the middle in which Griselda is stripped of her old identity. So she is stripped naked, which she doesn't really like, let's face it. He's started already. I mean, this is not usual for 15th century Tuscany, or anywhere, frankly. You can see her blushing, and I quite enjoy the way that his effete-looking retinue are all casting sly glances in her direction. And these two dogs, the same dog, looking rather dejected. Animals play an important part in these panels, as we will find out. So she's stripped of her old identity, and the central scene in this panel is the wedding scene, in which she's then dressed up in Gualtieri's colours, these golden robes, and they get married. I don't think I've ever seen an image of two people getting married that is so utterly devoid of emotion. In fact, all of the emotion in this work seems to be contained in this frenzy of kind of unbridled animal energy that is these horses just to the left of the couple, who seem to be quite strangely going crazy. They are in contrast to the golden horses, if you notice, on the triumphal arch, who feel to me as though they've been halted mid-gallop. It's like they were encased in gold and stopped in their tracks. Can you see that there might be a bit of a parallel between those horses and Griselda? I think so. The story continues next week. It gets worse. It gets worse. I'll see you then, I hope. Bye-bye.